Hello, my name is Ronald Peck. Thank you for participating in this discussion about leveraging English learner assets into building home and school connections. First question I want to answer is, what are cultural influences on teaching and learning? Cultural influences on teaching and learning shape a lot about the students' approach to learning, how they interact with others, and how they understand things around them. It impacts the way they communicate, their social behaviors, the way that they think, and it impacts the way that they engage with what you're teaching. Teachers need to be able to recognize these cultural differences and then change their teaching methods to be inclusive to each of the differences that they have in their classroom. Incorporating these relevant practices by using collaborative learning or culturally diverse materials or any other way to diversify the way they're teaching will be helpful for making deeper connections, but also deeper understanding for the students. What is cultural competence and its role in the instruction of English learners? Cultural competence is the ability to understand, respect, and interact with people from other cultural backgrounds. In the instruction of English learners, it's very important because educators need to be able to create an environment for students where they feel valued and understood down to their deepest level, and culture is one of a very deep part of the human mind. Culturally competent teaching practices are going to be what helps you create that inclusive environment, and that's how you're able to really connect with those students. How can English learners' cultural values and beliefs be integrated appropriately in the context of teaching and learning? Integrating English learners' cultural values and beliefs in teaching requires that you recognize and honor all their unique perspectives. This is done by having relevant readings from each different culture, having real-world examples that relate to each different culture, and discussions that are clearly catered towards the different cultures throughout your class. Educators and teachers have the ability to ask students to share about their culture, and that way they can educate their peers, but also their teacher and the other staff around them. By doing this, you're going to be able to create an environment that students feel more understood in, and thus they're more comfortable in. What is the role of culture in student learning? Culture plays a crucial and very important role for students as they're learning how to engage with and interact with everything around them, which includes other people. So this goes down to the ability for students to communicate, the way that students perceive things in their life, the way that they're raised, the way that really they just think about everything. Culture is one of the deepest parts of our mind, and it affects all the different ways that we are as people. So for students, it affects all the ways that they learn. How do school and classroom environments influence language acquisition, and what steps are necessary to create an inclusive environment? School and classroom environments are very, very impactful to language acquisition because they provide the area and the environment that the English learner is learning in. So if you have an environment that has a lot of language visuals, that has a lot of resources for bilingual students, and promotes students working together and engaging in content, then of course they're going to perform better. So having an environment that provides a lot of resources is very important for those students to acquire new language skills. What are some strategies for supporting and celebrating cultural diversity within instruction? So supporting and celebrating cultural diversity in instruction, it begins with integrating and using student cultural perspectives and bringing that into your teaching. By doing that, you educate other students and yourself on their cultures, and it also creates a space where those students are more free to share about their own cultures, and they feel more comfortable and more proud of where they're from and how they were brought up, or however their culture impacts their lives. And this, of course, is going to create deeper understanding and deeper engagement in your classroom. What are some strategies for leveraging home language and cultural assets? To leverage home language and cultural assets, you begin again by incorporating students' backgrounds, this time especially with linguistic backgrounds, into your teaching. For this, I'm going to encourage using translation and allowing students to use other languages in their learning. Don't require them to only use one language at a time. It's important that they are learning English, but that doesn't mean that they can only interact with English. It's important that they have the ability to learn how the languages translate to each other. By creating these bilingual, multilingual environments, students are going to feel more comfortable. They're going to feel the ability to make mistakes more often. They're going to feel the ability to use their own language in times they need it, and they're just going to be able to have a deeper connection with what's going on. What are some strategies for responsiveness to the different strengths, needs, and identities of all English learner students, including special needs? To support English learners' diverse strengths and needs, you have to differentiate your instruction. There's lots of ways to do this: scaffolding, multiple different ways of teaching, like having visuals, having hands-on, having supports for writing. Especially then you're going to look at small groups, you're going to look at peers working together. For English learners with special needs, you're going to need probably other resources than just yourself. So you're going to want to incorporate other resources at your school, but you're also going to need to incorporate modification, accommodation for these students. Really, all this is about is meeting the students' needs. Some students are going to be English learners, but they're really strong academically, and to meet their needs, you have to challenge them. Some students are going to be English learners who have special needs, and to meet their needs, you're going to modify and you're going to accommodate for them. If you can meet your students' needs, then you're going to be responding correctly to each of those things. And of course, it's the same as any other student. It's just that they don't know English, or they're still acquiring that fluency. So what are some opportunities and approaches to meet the social and emotional needs of English learners? Like all social emotional needs, the first step is to be welcoming and inclusive in your classroom. You have to be able to create a safe space for these students so that they are aware that they can be themselves, and then they'll be able to be more socially and emotionally aware of what's going on in their lives. As an educator and teacher, you need to be able to check in with your students. You need to be able to have conversations with them about how they're doing, and all that comes from having a welcoming environment. What is the importance of understanding the social, emotional, and cultural needs of students when establishing classroom routines and procedures? This is really important because students need to be comfortable with the classroom routines. If it's going to be something that they do every single day, they need to be aware that every day they're going to come to your classroom and be invited and comfortable and okay with what's going on. If they're uncomfortable with a daily routine, that means every day in their class they're going to be uncomfortable. That means they're not going to be socially and emotionally active in your classroom. They're not going to be able to talk to you. They're not going to be able to learn as well. When you're talking through these routines with yourself and thinking of what you need to do, you have to think about where students are coming from so that they are comfortable and prepared for your classroom every day. How might family and community practices influence language learning? Really, community and family practices are the main thing that's going to be impacting student language acquisition, especially when it comes to like school community. But in the family, it matters a lot, because if at home they only speak their native language, then the only time they're getting English instruction is at school, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that you have to tailor your instruction and know that they're probably at home after school, they're not practicing English. So that means while they're at school, you want to really get them lots of attention with English. And that's where your community practice of your classroom and your community practice of the community around the student it's important that there's English going on there so that the students are constantly engaging with the ability to learn another language. Because regardless of whether students learning English or a different second language, it's really helpful for their mind and helpful for them to learn that for their future. So what are some strategies to build and foster strong family, community, and school partnerships so that this can happen? To do this, of course, is not something that one teacher can do completely by themselves, but you can create some relationships just on your own. To do this, you're going to be wanting to be constantly in contact with your students' parents, and going to school events where their community is going to be, going to go see them when they're doing things that are related to school. You want to be active in the community, especially the community that the school already kind of provides. I mean, if that requires you to show up at arrival for students to come to school and you see them in the morning, or being there at dismissal to see them when they go home, calling their parents, going to their sports games, you want to be able to talk with their parents, talk with them outside of just a classroom setting. This will create a relationship with people who are really impacting their lives more often than you are, hopefully. So, what are effective family engagement practices that support and highlight the assets of home languages, including communication, family involvement, and providing intentional strategies for families of English learners? So, effective family engagement begins with being inclusive and honoring the home language. You can't just throw that out the window. And this is done through multilingual communication. You're going to need translated materials. You're going to need possibly interpreters if you need translation. You're going to have to be encouraging families to be at places where maybe that's not their native language, what's mostly going on there, for them to participate in things that are going on outside of just their native language, to create digital literacy, to really just partner with people that maybe aren't always using their native language. And the way to do this is, of course, through those relationships that you've already built. Because if you don't have a relationship, you can't push people to engage in practices that are good for them and their kids in terms of learning another language. So finally, what are some inclusive community engagement practices? So inclusive community engagement starts with building those relationships that we just spoke about. So you want to build relationships with families, you want to build relationships with the community, with local organizations, with businesses, with really whoever you can that's going to be able to create those positive relationships and create those opportunities for people to be in multilingual situations. This type of stuff can be by providing volunteer work for people. It can be through having an event that people can go to that isn't all in one language. It can be through lots of different things, but you want to be able to just make sure that all the community is included, not only one demographic or one specific group of people. Thank you for listening.